Okay, we're going to do a quick and dirty review of graphing quadratic equations. Now, quick reminder, a quadratic equation is of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals y. That's your basic form. Now, that's a quadratic equation because it has an equal sign in it. This is a quadratic formula. Very different. You use a quadratic formula in some cases to solve a quadratic equation, but they are certainly not the same thing. The particular equation that we're going to be using as our example is y equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 4. That's going to be our start. Now, there are about 3-4 ways to graph these things. The first way, and the most simple method but the most time consuming, is doing an XY chart. So if I say, well, if I plug in some x's, say a -2, a 0, and a 2, which of course I just pulled out of the air, there's no necessary reason for that. It just is what it is. I plug them in, say 2 times -2 squared minus 8 times -2 plus 4 equals 28. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when I have you graph the homework problem, I want to see this chart. I want to see it plugged in just like this. If you just plug it in your calculator and give me answers, it's not going to be acceptable. So I plugged in the 3 numbers and I got 3 answers. If I come along to graph it, we simply say 1, 2, go up 28. Over left to right nothing, up 4, over +2, down 4, we see this thing taking place. Now we know that a quadratic formula should actually have a shape that looks more like that. The challenge is, because we just happen to choose these points, we have no idea whether they're any good or not. That's why the graphing method, or plugging in, is probably your least effective. Your next most effective would be to find its vertex. Now, the good news is of finding the vertex method, is in the quadratic equation, you already have the basics for the vertex method. The vertex method says, if I find opposite of b over 2a, that gives me the x part of a point. And once I know what the x part is, I simply plug that into the function, whatever that number is, and that'll find me the y part. So if I can find the x part and the y part, I'd be good to go. Well, in our case, a equals 2, b equals -8, c equals 4. So if I say opposite of b, that'd be +8 over 2 times a, which is 2. So I say 8 over 2, which is 4. My x component is 4. Now all I have to do to find the y component is plug it in. So let's do that now. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me clarify. We've already found our first mistake of the year. My mistake. This is why we show our work. This is what we do. If I have 8 divided by 2 times 2, that's 4. 8 divided by 4 is not 4. It is, of course, 2. Now, the whole point of me showing that to you, I could have re-recorded the video, but the whole point of showing that to you is if we're doing multiple methods to the same end, the reason we do that is so that everything ought to match up. If it doesn't match up, we've made a mistake. If we've made a mistake, it's easy enough to see in our work. If all you've done is put it in the monkey box and it's wrong, you have no idea where it went. So, let's correct this. 2 times 2 squared minus 8 times 2 plus 4. Okay? And of course we come up with -4 as we did earlier. It just happens to be one of the points that I chose. So, at this point we can clearly see that our vertex is over 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the vertex. Now, the other thing you should know from Algebra 2 is that if the first number is positive, that means it's going to open up. So somewhere it's going to do this number. The question becomes where? Where is it going to go through the x-axis? To do that, we have a couple different methods. So, moving from there, let's figure out where it goes through the x-axis. Those are going to be its x-intercepts. Now, its x-intercepts, of course, are also known as its solutions, also known as its zeros. Now, there are 3 ways to find the zeros. So if I take this, y equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 4, I could first attempt to unfoil. Now, unfoil is an informal term. What we would say is we would attempt to factor, but since there are multiple ways to factor, I want to be specific. All right, well, let's try breaking it up here. The first thing I would do is I would take a 2 out, leaving x squared minus 4x plus 2, which should make factoring this significantly easier. The problem is when I go to factor this, no matter what I do, it's not going to unfoil easily. So this method, not necessarily our best method. Well, that brings us back to our old buddy, the quadratic formula. So if we use quadratic formula, it always works opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we have positive 8 plus or minus square root 8 squared, negative 8 squared, but when we square it, the negative is going to go away, minus 4 times 2 times 4, all over 2 times 2. If we work all of that out, we're going to come up with 8 plus or minus root 32 over 4, which if we reduce that turns into 2 plus or minus root 2. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is an exact answer. This is a big boy answer and an answer that you're going to use in pre-calculus, calculus, and moving forward. If you simply plug it into your monkey box, it's not going to go well. You need to be able to work in rational answers. So, with that, you can use this. Now, if we were to go graph it, we might want to give an approximation, because any decimal is nothing more than approximation. 2 plus or minus 1.41 ... So it's going to be 0.59-ish, or it's going to be 3.41-ish. But again, those are very informal numbers. So if I'm going to graph that, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to go over just a little bit. It goes through there, go over 1, 2, 3.5, goes through here. It makes sense that it's going to open positively. We're going to be somewhere in this ballpark. Now, that gives us 3 points. With 3 points, we can solidly say, yes, we have indeed graphed the quadratic equation. Now, one thing that your book highlights, I don't know why they highlight it so much, but they do, is this right here is the axis of symmetry. It means whatever's on this side is exactly the same as whatever's on this side. The axis of symmetry is kind of dumb in the sense that it will always go through the vertex. So if this point is 2, negative 4, the axis of symmetry is always going to be x equals 2. It's going to be x equals whatever that number is. That is your axis of symmetry. So it's here, it's up, it works. If you were to try to use numerical graphing, you could simply go to your axis of symmetry and try to find a point to either side. So if I had x, I want y. I know the axis of symmetry is at 2. Maybe I'd try 1, and maybe I'd try 3, and that would give me 3 points. That would at least give me the curve. But it's best to find the solutions. Now, there is one more way to find the solutions for quadratic graphing. Instead of unfoil, instead of quadratic, we can complete the square. We can complete the squared. So, with that, we would say 2x squared minus 8x plus 4 equals 0. The problem is we don't like a 2 here in completing the square. So let's divide everything by 2. X squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Now, with that, I can try to break this up into perfect squares. X, x. What perfect square would make a 4? Well, it would be nice if I had a minus 2 and a minus 2. But if I had a minus 2 and a minus 2, that means I would need to have a 4 over here. So to get 4, I'm going to add 2 more. But if I add 2 to one side, I must add 2 to the other. So in this case, I get x minus 2 equals 2, meaning x minus 2 squared equals 2. X minus 2 squared minus 2 by bringing it to the other side equals y. Graphing using this method means I can adjust. So, using that to both sides is where we would put this thing to bed. So you have unfoil, quadratic, and completing the square. With that, we have different ways of solving, different ways of factoring. The last thing I want to show you is you can use a graphing calculator. Y equals, plug it in here, graph. Now, it may or may not look very good, so we go to Zoom, Zoom Standard, and from here, you can calculate the intercepts or the zeros. You can do a number of things with your calculator. But again, the problem with the calculator is it's all going to be an approximation. So we don't need to use it. We don't need to worry about it for now. These are all skills that you should be able to do by hand. With that, you have one problem of homework to do momentarily. Very quickly, I realized I didn't finish solving this for you. To finish solving this, all you have to do is take the square root of both sides. So you have x minus 2 equals plus or minus root 2, and that's going to give you the same thing as you had over here, giving you the same two solutions. With that, your homework is as follows. Do x squared, y equals x squared minus 6x plus 3. Graph it by plotting. 3 points is all that's necessary. Graph by hand using the vertex method, by using opposite of b over 2a, etc. And then find the zeros. Find where it crosses the x-axis. It is possible, but I want you to do it all 3 ways. Try it by unfoiling, by quadratic, and then by completing the square. This must be done by hand. You must show all your work. If your work does not look exactly like what I have here in my notes that are online, you will not receive credit. All right. Thank you.